Welcome, everybody. This is John Paul Mendoza, Dr. Speed Selling. This is Raging Verbalist number 111. That's 111 for those of you who don't know what all that means. And welcoming you back. And with me, as always, is the lovely Sandra. Sandra, how you doing?
I am well. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. And for those of you who don't know, we are sending. Let's take a moment and send some warming thoughts to Sandra because she is in a state of the refrigerator. In fact, most refrigerators aren't even close to being that cold because where she lives in Nebraska, it was. So did it get to 9 degrees yesterday?
Actually, I don't think so, or at least not when I checked, but it's 9 now. But for a
Oh,
long time, it was -2. So I'm in the deep freeze.
so there you go. So anybody who's out there whining and moaning and complaining, but let's send her some warm thoughts. And with that, let me just explain a little bit about what we're doing here and how we do it. So Raging Verbalist is we have a topic or two. We go through a bunch of questions and hopefully you learn a bunch of things. And right now I'm looking for something. What am I looking for? Anyway, don't do that when the camera's on, John. He gets distracted easily. I think my kindergarten teacher said that to my mother, and she was like, "Really? Yeah, I never noticed." Right? Okay. So, just keep on moving. All right. So what happens is that, and by the way, you can go to the Position to Win book Facebook group, and you can ask or toss in topics or questions. Also, of course, you can go to positiontowinbook.com, positiontowinbook.com. All right. So let us not stall out here. This is now the new year, and we have another hot topic, cold in Nebraska, but a hot topic today.
All right. So we're talking about being risk-free. So why do you say that we're all looking for a risk-free life?
Well, it's interesting that as technology has evolved, as things have moved along, more and more and more people want like this risk-free, I don't have to worry about things. I mean, if we could just kind of wrap ourselves with, bubble wrap, real and imagined, that we could just have this risk-free life and, nothing's ever going to happen to us. You meet people all the time who say, oh, this happened to them and they were shocked about it because we've now kind of moved ourselves to less and less risk. Now, I'm not saying that you should take dumb risks, but I could just tell you that having looked around the world. I mean, you take cars, automobiles. If you drive one of those things, I mean, it has a certain danger to it. Yet, what we now have is we now have cars that are fatter and heavier than ever before, more safety features than ever before, all of these things, and yet we have people who still defeat those and get themselves injured, and that's a sad thing. But the goal of the people who are the risk freers is that we're going to find a way to get to where we have zero risk on these things, and the only way to get to zero risk, and I don't even know if that actually works, is that you'd have to like hole up in some cave. Of course, you got to watch out for those damn bats or something else, or dripping, who knows what oozes out of the the pores of the earth or something. But people just seem to be gravitating more and more to risk-free, and they're all looking for risk-free life. In fact, there's a great quotation from the guy who wrote the book Sapiens. I cannot pronounce his name for the life of me, so I don't want to butcher it up. But if you want to go check out his book Sapiens and Homo Deus, which is really fascinating stuff, it will probably irritate you if you're on the left or the right, doesn't matter. But he basically says that the modern world has been shaped by the belief that humans can outsmart and defeat death. I mean, I think that kind of says it all. So we are seeing this big, huge drive that we want to be as risk-free as we possibly can, and that we're gonna live forever. And we'll see if that actually pans itself out, because of course, well, things have changed, haven't they? They'll last a little bit.
That's right. So speaking of that, how have things changed in the last 24 months for obtaining this risk-free existence?
Well, everybody was feeling pretty good, you flossed, you ate your kale, you you did all of those right things, and you had a you had a monitor on you, and you had the baby monitor to listen to the kid, and you've got all of these things going on, and then along comes a virus and sits down beside us and kicks our ass away. And that's really what's kind of happened. And it doesn't matter where it came from in the big sense of things. It's just like whenever you get anything, I mean, it's great to say, oh well, we know where you got this disease. Well, that's great. What do I do about I'm intellectually satisfied but still sick. So the last 24 months has been a real, and it's a technical expression for all of you out there. It's really been a shit show, because what's happened is that everybody who thought that they were just in great shape, that this is going to work, and then we end up with this crazy virus, uh, and it starts making us much more aware of the vulnerability and the lack of what we know. Because see, we always have this very smugness of science that we know it all, that we're all aware, we're omnipotent, we control this, we control that, and we're on top of all this, when in fact we are better than we were, but we're a long ways from perfection. And so yeah, so I think we had the whole thing in a cocked hat. Ironically, I was in Vegas in January of 2020, and at we went to the Bellagio. We didn't stay there, but we went to the Bellagio because they were having a big Chinese New Year decorations and all that inside the Bellagio. It was amazing. Place was filled with a lot of people who were Chinese, and they were there. And Bellagio had had banners in Chinese and all of that other stuff. And looking back, it's kind of interesting that I didn't get it, because or my wife, that we didn't get the virus and get the disease, because here we were in very close proximity. Place was packed, and then just a few weeks and then months, and then the whole world started shutting down. So I think what happened is that we ended up with a cocked hat. We got our asses kicked, and people are like, "Oh, wait a second, how in the world did that happen?" Well, it's called life, and it's called we. There are lots of things that are left out there that will probably be mysteries to us until they reveal themselves.
All right. So what rules and regulations tell you that we're still striving to achieve this goal?
Well, in rapid fire, they took some interesting technology, the RMNA, and they rejiggered it so it would be a virus, a vaccine. And by the way, I've had it. I've had the vaccine, so don't think I'm like knocking vaccines. But what happened is that since most people flunked fifth grade science, and I mean this, you may have gotten a nice letter score, but you didn't really understand it, is that most people believe that this vaccine, that once they were going to get it, it was going to be, and that the right word is a prophylactic. Um, and I know whenever you use that fancy word, people are thinking about a different kind of prophylactic. But what it means is that this thing was going to be some giant iron shield that you would wrap around yourself, and you could defiantly go out in the world, look down and stare down the virus and say, give me your best shot, which is not what you want to do. Well, it turns out that this is a different kind of world that we are in, and that isn't what the vaccine does. Now, all we really are is victims. I mean, this is my observation: victims of a wanting to believe not in what it really is, but what we want it to be. We want to believe that we take a couple of shots and we're protected, and it doesn't matter what happens, what we do. And having lived through other health crises, having been in it, the craziest part of my life was being in Vegas for 4 years, and that was just before the AIDS crisis. And I have to tell you that I was concerned, to say the least, because of the gestation period. But I can tell you that lots of people say, well, we found a way to just fix it and it's done. So, and then now we see that we're going through multiple lockdowns. We got people going crazy about masking. We got people doing all this other stuff. And I'm not saying that these things can't help, but there is no risk-free. We're going to learn how to live with it or not. And we can't stay, I don't know about you, but I'm not staying in the bunker much longer. It's time to just say, it's over. There's now talk about a movement of I would say libertarians thinking that, we have to declare that February 1 is live with it day, and that we're going to move on and do all that. But all these rules and regulations, and the discussion that they may move the Super Bowl because California and the county of Los Angeles, the city of wherever the SoFi Stadium is, I think it's in Englewood, that there may be regulations against having that number of people. That would be a ridiculous idea and a ridiculous concept, because we're going to have people get sick. Guess what? Humans have been getting sick since, we've been humans. Everybody gets sick at some point in time. And so that's what I see is all of those kind of regulations. Hey, let's get one mask, let's get two masks, let's get three masks, let's get a face shield, let's get I don't know. I guess we'll eventually have the Darth Vader mask or something, but it's just maybe that's where he got it from. So so those are the things that tell me that we're still striving to achieve this goal. And I still hear a lot of people saying, and this to me is very divisive. Anybody who gets sick on something, I mean, I guess we can sit there and ridicule them. We can tell them, geez, you shouldn't have gotten sick. There is no way that we know today how to not get this. It's airborne and it sucks. So when I hear people talking about, it's all of them that are infecting all of us. No, it's the damn virus that's infecting all of us. So that's what I see.
All right. So have we been conditioned to expect that everything was going to become better, faster, cheaper in every aspect of life?
The answer is a resounding yes, and there's more to that than just saying that. We became so convinced, we became so unaware of the fact that the world was going to continue to change, things were going to continue to happen, and all of this was going to keep going on, that we started to believe our own, as the saying goes in Hollywood, be careful if you start believing your own press clippings and your own stories that you're telling. But we believed that everything was going to be in the future all done. Everything was going to be in this great perfect state. And hey, we're all good. We're done. And the reality is that we are in better shape than we have ever been, from a knowledge standpoint, from a communication standpoint, from a technology standpoint. But the reality of it is that you still have to deal with, without a doubt, you still have to deal with all of those various things that happen in life, and they're going to happen no matter what. And we're going to continue to see them happening. In fact, the thing that is interesting is that medicine is finally kind of changing. And I don't know if it's changing quickly enough, but it's changing in which doctors are saying to patients, listen, there's no cure for what you have, but there is a management process that we're going to go through. And what I mean by that is like I have a couple of bad knees, played soccer, played football, cycled, mountain climbed in my reckless youth, got two bad knees, and all that. Now we're managing those knees. So there is no cure. I mean, I guess there's an end to it. I mean, if I I don't know, did a really crazy thing, but there's no cure. There's nothing. I mean, now I could go get a knee replacement potentially, but all that is that that's still forestalling the inevitable decline. So I think that we have been convinced, and we want to believe. Who doesn't want to believe that it is going to be perfect in the future? And especially the way the internet has trained us, we are worse than, and if you've ever had a dog, the first time that you look at those sad eyes, because dogs are really good at those sad eyes, and you give them a little snack, a little treat, they will never ever forget that. I mean, they'll forget everything else, but they will never forget that you gave them a snack, and they will come back over and over and over again. And some of them will become very aggressive and bark, and and then of course, every time you are going to resolve that you are going to outstay the dog who's going to bark for the treat, all I'm going to tell you is you're never going to make it. You're never going to make it because that dog is going to win. Now, the same thing happens with humans. We are the dog who got the treat. We had some of these things happen for us. They worked out. It was great. We had lots of extra years. Things were fantastic. My father luckily got a kidney transplant, which gave him like 7.5 great years before, well, he succumbed to cancer, but he got 7.5 great years, but there was no permanent fix to it. So I think that we have been seduced, or we wanted to be seduced by this. Now, for all of you out there, so you actually can deal with a place of reality as we are in this new year and wanting to go forward and get smarter and get better. I do have a little bit of an antidote, and that is you can go pick up either one of these 2 books. But let's talk about Most Businesses Fail in the First 5 Minutes. It just takes them 3 to 5 years to realize it. Position to Win. When Gabe Batista, my co-author, co-conspirator, and I started working on that book, the reality is that most businesses fail right up front. They fail before they even get started. They fail because they miss some fundamental things. So if you don't want to be a failure, if that's one of the areas of life that you want to be amazingly successful, go check out the book, go pick it up. You can go get it in all electronic forms, Amazon, Kindle, you can go get Barnes & Noble Nook, you can go get Apple iBooks. You can also get it at Amazon as a paper copy, a physical copy, also at Barnes & Noble Books A Million. And you can go to positiontowinbook.com, positiontowinbook.com, buy it directly from there. That's not the cheapest place to buy it, but what you'll do is you'll get, first off, you can get me to sign it. The next thing is that we're going to do all kinds of good things for you. Also, if you go to positiontowinbook.com, you will find all kinds of cool free stuff that is there that you can go grab and do all that. So hopefully that actually lowers your risk, because people take inordinate risks and they ruin their credit, they ruin their business, they ruin all that. So keep that in mind. Also, if you are going to deal with the reality that we're going to be on more long distance, remote work, all that, check out Remote Work for a Better World. Remote Work for a Better World, available exclusively on Amazon Kindle. All right, with that, Sandra, back to you. What is the next thing that we are going to cover?
All right, so for the next question, last week you teased that you'd tell us when January 1st became the first day of the year. So don't leave us hanging.
Okay. So for those of you who think that everything is new, it was this guy named Julius Caesar. And no, he wasn't in Las Vegas. And Julius Caesar said, hey, I'm not happy with the way the calendar system is working. They use the lunar calendar. And hey, I don't know, what the hell day it is. It's just, I guess he just didn't have, the right app or something. So and I just want to make sure I got it right. In 46 BC, that's a long time ago, 46 BC. So nominally that would be how long? 2068 years ago. He changed the calendar on us, and he made January 1st is the start of the new year, and essentially adopted the calendar that we have now and made a little bit of an adjustment. So every 4 years we have to have a leap year, and check that out. So that's when we started, 46 BC. So nobody around today is old enough to know that, but we still live according to that, because he figured it out. Again, that was a modern invention, right? Back then, everybody went, wow, hail Caesar, this is a genius, this is working. Yep, well, we're still using it well over 2,000 years later. So there you go, Sandra. You can now sleep at night knowing the answer to that question.
Good, thank you. All right, so next question. You interviewed Jose Cordero, who wrote The Death of Death. So do you think that this is a possibility going forward in life?
So for those of you who have not seen that interview, it is up on the Raging Verbalist channel. So go check it out. And it will be an interesting discussion. So Jose, who's a very smart guy, and he's not some kind of fringe lunatic kind of guy, wrote the book The Death of Death. Unfortunately, and I haven't checked recently, but it was not available in English. So I cannot read Spanish, but the point of it is that he believes, with the way that scientific technology is going, that we will be able to reprogram our biological side, reprogram ourselves, and in fact, in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, get to a point where we're going to see actually people living much, much longer than today. And we have a lot of people living to, 80s, 90s, and well into, 100. So that is the concept of it. Do I think it's possible? Primarily because there's so many things that we don't know, and there's so many things that we don't catch early enough. So usually when you meet somebody who dies of something, they die of it because they didn't know they had the condition until it was too late to try to make a change or do a fix or do something like that. Something popped up and they weren't quite sure what it was. And, hey, I don't know what that is. I'll scratch it. It feels a little better. And then they just kind of moved on. But what happens is that he's talking about curing many things, especially because of the RMNA sequence or toolkit, if you will. And some of those things that he made sounded pretty amazing to me. Do I think it's possible here in 22? I think it's a long shot, but again, we are going through, and this is where what happens with something like COVID. Oh, I said it. When something happens with the virus, that what takes place is that it takes a lot of energy that gets focused on this, because it is this new novel type of thing. Well, we have a lot of other things, and hopefully we're going to go do that. So I'm more of a skeptic. Jose is a true believer in this. If his book ever comes out, we'll have him back on. And I'm talking about back out in the US and in English. But what I can tell you is that I believe that, yes, medical technology is going to strive to move forward. I asked him what was the key thing, and that is, well, taking care of yourself so you live longer, so you're around when the technology kicks in, so you can take advantage of that. So what is that for all of us, especially as we're trying to have New Year's resolutions, which is try to find a way to be healthier. In fact, the biggest factor of people who are, gonzo from the, and that's my nice way of saying it, for the virus, is obesity. Obesity was like the number one extra cause of this. You get it, and you're fat, and you're gone. So keep that in mind the next time you're grabbing for that Oreo or whatever that might be.
All right. So why are so many living in abject fear in spite of evidence to the contrary?
Well, once you get somebody conditioned to a fear-based mindset, it ends up having a residual effect. And let's take another virus that hit, and it wasn't a virus in the sense of a medical one, and that is whenever you have a great economic collapse, and what happens is that you end up with an entire group of people who in mass experienced this disaster that happened to them. So my parents were relatively young during the Great Depression. They went through that. By the time it was basically over, they went through their formative years. But I heard about it as an echo 30 plus years later and 40 years later, and it was still affecting them all the way through. In fact, there's like just some weird stuff that they brought with them. Again, I'm not knocking them. I didn't go through that, but there's a residual effect that happens even though you're on the other side of the crisis. In their case, like they would get a really nice present from a friend of theirs, and they would leave it boxed up and sealed, and they would never open it, because if they opened it and they used it and then it broke and then it went away, then you know what? Then we didn't we weren't good stewards of it. And in the Great Depression, you didn't throw out anything because you just you had that depression mentality. And in fact, I saw that. My father owned a machine shop. We were driving in his truck, and we're driving down this 2-lane highway, and he steps on the brakes, and we turn around. And I said, well, what happened? Something fall out of the truck? No. And we drive back, I don't know, about a quarter of a mile, half a mile. We weren't going that fast, maybe 40 miles an hour. And we're looking and looking and looking. He goes, there it is. And he found a chain, and it wasn't like a little chain, but it was a big chain, the kind of chain that you can tow something. I mean, you can drag something. He goes, look at that chain. Now, thing must have weighed 50 freaking pounds and had fallen off somebody's truck. And my father goes, there you go. This is a good day. And tossed the chain in the back. And frankly, when we auctioned off his machine shop, the last thing I was going to do was like keep this thing for nostalgia. I mean, it's like, yikes. But there you go. That even to the evidence to the contrary. So people today, in spite of the fact that we have things have improved, they live in this fear. And my guess is that residual fear is going to continue for a significant period of time, unless they can get this out of their heads. And my suggestion to everybody out there is that you got to deal with it and let's let it go.
All right. So what's your favorite example of the absurdity of wanting to live in a risk-free world?
Oh, I would say that some of the absurdities that I've seen are people who are sitting there and of the belief that if they in fact just do everything right, they're going to live forever. Now, I'm not a believer that it's all fate. I do believe that you have to be careful about it. I don't agree with the but I knew a person smoked 3 packs of cigarettes today and lived to 94 years old. I mean, yeah, those are really anomalies. But what I can tell you is that probably the biggest absurdity that I see is that people start to wall themselves in. They start to contract their space in their world. And to me, the absurdity of that is that when you do that, when you stop living, you'll never get those days back. I mean, you will never get them back. Now, I'm not saying you walk into, out there in the world and naively go, let me have it. Give me all the disease you got. But what I'm saying is you cannot get yourself locked into this mindset that, you are going to be, in this super safe world. And to me, the biggest absurdity is that. And I'll just tell a little story about Carl. Carl was somebody that I met because I had a shared office, an executive suite. And Carl and Dave and I used to go out to lunch all the time. And Carl had survived many things. And Carl was an ambulance chasing attorney. And what that meant is that he did personal injury kind of deals. And Carl was a person who became more and more and more concerned about the risks that we all faced. And Carl was the first person I ever met who bought a vehicle, and it was a beautiful vehicle, but he bought it because it had a great safety rating, but it had an airbag. And we were like, airbag? Well, what the hell's an airbag? And he bought that. And then Carl, quit doing anything dangerous at all. And he kept getting fewer and fewer things that he would do. Now, here was a guy who had been a Marine, and he went to Vietnam and survived the Tet Offensive. Came back, became a cop in Sacramento, and was on the mean streets of Sacramento, and went to law school at night, and became an attorney. So he had survived the toughest things. And Carl kept giving things up. And we said, Carl, I mean, what are you doing? I mean, you're making great dough. Have a little bit of fun. Again, I had become sober by that point in time, but now I said, go out and have some fun. And sadly, what happened is that Carl, the last thing, because he couldn't give everything up, right? He was like, I'm not saying he's going to become a monk, but he was just very cautious about everything he did. And he went skiing because that was his only risky thing. And he had a skiing accident, screwed up his knee. Remember I said before, you got to manage it. Well, in those days, how you manage it is that they had to operate. Now, he had sued all these hospitals. He had sued all of these doctors. He had sued all of these various professionals. and he knew who the good people are and the bad people are, and he had to, like, sign waivers and everything. And they did a scope on his knee. So, they weren't going to cut open his knee. They did a scope. And what happened was, in 90 minutes, I mean, this is an absurdity. Within 90 minutes of him having that surgery, he develops a blood clot, and that blood clot goes and kills him. Now, David and I were pretty upset. I mean, it's not like we were best buddies, but it's somebody we got, we had this relationship. And David and I couldn't stop laughing at the absurdity of it, not of his death, but the absurdity of it, because here Carl had methodically, decidedly removed every risky thing he could remove from his life, only to end up being a guy who gets in a skiing accident, picks all the right people, ends up with that 1 in 100 or 1 in 1,000, or I mean, it's really it wasn't even 1 in 100. It was like 1 in 1,000, 1 in 5,000 complication. That to me was like the absurdity of all absurdities that I observed. Sad, because I always loved talking to him. I wish he was around when I went out on my own, because I would have asked him a whole bunch of questions. But to me, that was the kind of absurdity, because he was attempting and stated categorically that he was going to live a risk-free life. Doesn't exist.
All right. So is there an exit to this delusional mindset that seems to be so pervasive?
Well, I think what you have to do is you have to say, I'm going to live my life. I'm going to do what I can possibly do, but I'm not going to become obsessed with our current situation to the point of where it doesn't pay off. There's a quote, and I couldn't find the source of it, but I just remember it from years ago, which is, what you need to do is you need to have a life worth risking for. See, we're never going to get anywhere if we're not going to take a chance, if we're not going to go out and do things. So what you have to do is you have to get out of that cocoon, and you have to go out there in the real world and be involved and be a participant and do all those things. This is why, as soon as I could, I, got myself over to, in fact, I had to drive to Phoenix to get the shot early, because California is a state of confusion, and did all of those things. Now, it didn't prevent me from getting Delta, but what it did is I think it reduced the severity of it. But right now, I have a mindset of, life is all about living, and 22 is all about going out and doing those things. Bottom line is that if you don't do that, if you don't take that step, if you aren't getting outside and saying, I've got to go out there and live and not be in this heightened state of total paranoia, what you'll discover is that you will never get these years back. You'll never get the sense of adventure. And what you'll have is you'll have that stain, that sense of dampening down, that loss of those kinds of things. And for the rest of your life, you'll be sitting there, and instead of trying to think outside the box, you're going to want to think about how to construct the box, how to reinforce the box ever smaller. The question is, simple question I leave all of you with is, are you going to try to get a more bigger, better life, or a more constricted and tighter and smaller world? What I hope for all of you is success, happiness, health, and more importantly, the courage to overcome whatever fear you may have, because make sure that you have a life worth risking for.